Hi there, I'm Molly,
And I'm Jamie. We're the owners of Hired Hand Software.
and this is Season 6 of our From the Pasture podcast. For more than 15 years, we've been helping breeders promote their pedigree livestock with our easy-to-use, animal management-driven website software.
Each week, we bring you stories from the pasture, breeding philosophies, ranch traditions, cattle knowledge, and conversation with folks using Hired Hand to power their livestock marketing.
So settle in for today's episode of From the Pasture with Hired Hand. Welcome to this episode of From the Pasture with Hired Hand. Today we're heading to Southwest Michigan, halfway between Kalamazoo and Grand Rapids, to visit Hubbell Longhorns, a program built on deep agricultural roots, long-term vision, and decades of commitment to the Texas Longhorn breed. I'm your host, Molly Clubb, and I'm excited to welcome today's guest, Mark Hubbell, a breeder whose family farming legacy dates all the way back to 1895, and whose name is now firmly woven into the history of modern Longhorn genetics. From raising cattle that carry the Hubbell's prefix with pride, to helping identify influential bulls early on, to serving the breed through leadership and futurities, Mark's story is one of patience, partnerships, and passion, and today we get to hear how it all came together. So Mark, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and the history of your family farm?
I am the fifth generation here, and my forefathers settled this back in 1895. We were dairy farmers up until 2000, and then now we just raise Angus and Longhorns and, and a fair amount of hay and some corn and some beans. So, yeah, I'm just the fifth generation, and hopefully it carries on many more.
So 5 generations is kind of crazy for a farm today and dating back all the way to 1895. Do you have photos of what the farm looked like back then, or have you been told stories of, kind of how it operated and maybe how it has evolved other than the dairy and the crops?
Well, yeah, I mean, we don't really have much photos way back when, no. Just we have aerials from probably the 70s on through of the farm, which has changed quite a bit over that time.
So you mentioned that, back then there was a focus on dairy and also a lot more focus on farming the land. What transitioned or drove the changes to changing your direction to Longhorns?
Just because that's my passion. So I just gradually grew it over time to where we are now, which is probably about 250 head. I just kind of did a rough count yesterday. I would say we're probably around that. I think we're going to have between 125 and 150 calves born in 2026. But it's just me and my passion. I'm the only one that, well, other than my son Garrett, that really cares about Longhorns. Before that, we were just dairy farming, and that it encompasses. Yeah, it's just me.
So talk to me a little bit about how that passion started.
I've always been intrigued by Longhorns. Even when I was young, like in high school, I had a winter beater, and I had these little set of horns that are, kind of mounted on the little wooden frame. And I actually mounted them on the hood of my car, kind of like Boss Hog and the Dukes of Hazzard. But I just was always intrigued by Longhorns. And then, gosh, I guess it would have been in 1995. Yeah. My first wife asked me what I wanted for Christmas. I'm like, man, I don't know. I got thinking, I'm like, oh, a Longhorn would be cool. So she got me a Longhorn. It was just like a white heifer, roper type, nothing much, but that's what got me hooked. And I just went from there and never looked back.
Did you ever dream or think that you would be as well-known and successful within the breed as you are today, back when you had that first one for Christmas?
No. It's funny. I mean, when you're first starting out and you see all the big breeders and the big names and that, and just a little guy from Michigan, and you don't really think you ever could make a difference or have an impact. But I know Tom reminded me, it was a while ago, that we were driving around and talking about that. And I said, man, we'll never be, big time like those guys are. And I was wrong. But you never know what life's going to bring and the opportunities that you're going to get. So it seems impossible, but it really isn't.
Well, you say that you're just a little guy from Michigan, but with 250 head, you have to be one of the largest Longhorn breeders in the state, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. But that was back when I started. You asked me when I started, if I thought
Mm-hmm.
that,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't, in the beginning, I was just going to have a handful anyway. And then it's definitely an addiction. Even to this day, as many as I got, you still go to a sale and looking at what you could buy and um, it just never stops. So, but in the beginning, no, I never envisioned to be where I am.
So, how much do you think your history and experience with raising dairy cattle carried over when you did get started with the Longhorns in terms of understanding their, traits and breeding and doing the work on your pedigrees?
I'm sure that it had um, a fair amount of influence. I mean, I've just always grown up with cattle, so I always understood them, and I'm not, they don't scare me or anything like that. So the Longhorns and the horns themselves, obviously, you got to be aware of them, but it's not like, they scared me. So, but as for knowing cattle, yeah, I mean, I grew up with them, so um, you understand what a good trait and a bad trait is, and um, this it's just one of those things you learn through experience that is invaluable, really.
Well, we're going to pick your brain a little bit further in today's episode about some of the famous animals that you've bred and contributed, to the genetics. But one question I have before we move on to kind of the history of your program is, as I understand it, your farm used to be named Hubbell Foothill Farms in those early generations. What made you decide to drop the foothill from the name when you kind of took over and turned your passion for Longhorns into the branding for today's farm?
Well, it is still really called Hubbell Foothill Farms. That's the farm itself, but Hubbell Longhorns is the Longhorn side of it, I guess you would say. It's it's not different or changed or anything like that. It's just if I would mean Hubbell Foothill Farms doesn't incorporate the name Longhorns, so I never ever used it, and Hubbell Longhorns just started out in the beginning, and why would I change it?
And does that come from your location in the state, or does it have a different
Yeah,
meaning?
it's because of the hills here. Our farm well, we have two farms, but the main farm, the original farm, is really, really hilly. And so I guess my great great grandpa must have been the one to name it. I've never really asked who named it. I mean, it's quite obvious why that we named it that. So yeah, it's all relative to the hills.
Well, let's go back to 1995. So that's when you first began raising them. You got your first ones. Just tell us a little bit about kind of what you were thinking and what your logic was when you started off versus how you've grown to where you are today. Just kind of walk us through your history, and then later on we'll go over some philosophies and some lessons learned.
Well, it's always been about big horns for me. So in the beginning, even that was what I guess turned me on. Um, I like a nice body conformation and color. And obviously pedigree is very important. But horn I mean, they're Texas Longhorns, they're not Texas Shorthorns. So that's always something that's been the main emphasis for me. I try hard not to single trait breed, but in the beginning, I would say that was more of a single trait breeding in my part. Um, But, nowadays I mean, it's so different. There's so many bighorn cattle out there that you can choose from anymore that we didn't have in the beginning. There was just a handful of bighorn ones. I mean, mostly it was Butler stuff, really. and they were definitely the most consistent to producing horn as well. That was my main focus and goal, was bigger horn, the better.
Imagine managing your animals and updating your website without needing any tech experience.
That's exactly why we built Hired Hand software. It's designed for breeders, not web designers.
Upload animals, track records and new calves, update photos, all in just a few clicks.
Whether you're brand new or growing a multi-breed program, we make sure your online presence is easy, modern, and manageable.
Visit hiredhandsoftware.com and see how simple it can be to keep your herd and your website up to date. So around the time you were getting started, I think was about when I was wrapping up my career in the youth show ring. And I always ask folks who have been around that long this question: what did you think a huge longhorned cow's tip to tip was at that time in 1995 and around then?
I mean, a 70, I'm pretty sure 70 was like the wow factor. There might have been some 80s. I don't know if there was.
I feel like if there were 80s, we didn't hear about them, right? Somebody was keeping
Yeah.
them hidden.
Yeah. I mean, back then it's 70 inches and you're just going, wow, how did they do that? And now you look at it, I mean, we're close to 120. It's just crazy how the bar has risen. And then you think about these calves that are like in the belly, or, just the young stock right now. Where are they going to be? It's mind boggling, really. Just the leaps and bounds that we've taken.
For sure. It is for folks that have been around, as long as you have, to see the changes that the breed has gone through. There's been a lot of them. I think if you look at different spans in time, for sure, from maybe early 2000s on, we've seen more change in the cattle than we did maybe the 100 years, prior, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
What do you think, like when you think back to those days in the late 90s, early 2000s, as you were growing your herd, what was the most common horn shape?
Well, obviously the functional horn. I mean, that's what I've been trying to breed out forever. Um, it's the hardest thing to breed out. That's for sure. But I mean, back the original Longhorns that lived out in the wild, that horn set is what the bull had that won the fight, that bred the cows. And I'm sure the cows that, defended themselves and their calves the best, they had the functional, forward swoop type horn. So it's just natural that would be in there. Now, we have done an excellent job of getting away from that. You still see it some, but it's definitely not as prevalent as it was by any means.
What do you feel like the second most popular horn set was? Do you feel like handlebar was still kind of the
Oh,
second most at that time, or?
so you're talking like desirable popular. I thought you meant most, like what most common Longhorns had.
Well, both. Like, I'm just wanting to talk through with you, I think both. Your first answer was spot on, and then yeah, let's talk a little bit about maybe what folks, especially those who were acquiring a lot of Butler animals into their herd, what they were seeing at the time.
I've always loved the handlebar, the roll out and then roll back over. And if you can put even a full twist in that, it's even more beautiful. But yes, I've always loved that. And that was JP Rio Grande. I mean, he was just the most beautiful bull. He had that horn set as a bull himself, and he threw that a lot. Very well. He was the most consistent of any bulls then. That he gave that. It wasn't, there's no bull that does anything 100%, but he was the best at it. Hunts Command Respect was great at it as well.
Let's talk a little bit about how you built your herd that, we'll call today's herd. So, you talk a lot on your website about growing through careful selection and how it's really important to you that you retain your heifers. Why do you feel like that approach has worked, and why is it important to you?
Well, the heifers are the future, obviously. And I mean, it takes a lot of times a couple of years to really know, and sometimes longer, but it's hard to have patience. That's for sure. So, I mean, it's basically is because I mean, what you're building is that next generation, and that never ends. I mean, I breeding longhorns is what I love to do. I mean, I love to see. I like to think in my mind, is this cross going to work? What's it going to make? And then see if it does happen. And then the more consistently that I can do that, um, you know, the more success, the more I enjoy it. So the heifers are your future, and obviously you can't keep them all, but some of them will shine early, and you're like, man, I love watching this one, and then some of them will shine later, but um, it's the future basically.
So what are you looking at? The first time a heifer hits the ground and even when you go out to see if it's a heifer or a bull, like you said in your head, you've planned this breeding strategy, this pedigree. What are some of the first things you're looking for to see if that heifer has the traits that you're wanting?
Flat horn, how the horn's coming out of the head, if it's got a backward angle, if it's staying more lateral. I mean, that to me is I'm that's my first thing I look for. Obviously, I want confirmation. Um, Great color is always a big bonus in the beginning, because if you got great color, then if you don't have great color, you're not going to be showing that in the futurities, because without great color, it's harder to win. Um, and if they've got extra navel, things like that, that it's probably not going to be a futurity type animal. I love futurities. It is just a lot of fun. It's just one day right then. I mean, it doesn't make the animal less of an animal in the long run per se, but it's a fun competition that is right then and what that animal is about then, and not, before and not after, realistically. So that's where the color and the confirmation part comes in. And then obviously the flat horn is going to help in futurity as well. But yeah, so that's what I look for.
So can I ask you, when you talk about confirmation, what specifically are you looking at on that young animal to decide if she kind of meets your standards? Because I feel like a lot of your animals in your breeding, you have very nice sized, good conformation, big body animals. So I'm just curious what you would tell other folks, what are you looking for that you would advise them to also look for in their young animals?
You just got to be honest with yourself when you look at it. And has it got a flat back? Has it got a good squared off tail set? Are the legs placed correctly underneath? They're not too far forward. They're not too post legged. Um, the ankle's good, so the feet are at the right angle. Trim neck. A feminine face is nice on a heifer. Obviously, it's not going to be a make or break per se. I mean, it can, but generally speaking, it's not as big as influence as like a back. You don't want too much navel. A little bit of navel can be okay, because sometimes that means they're going to be a bigger animal and they'll grow into it. And then obviously a splashy paint job is just, speckles or whatever is awesome. That's going to, once again, that gives you another advantage in the show ring too.
When you're running a ranch or taking care of animals, you need a feed store you can trust, one that knows the products, the lifestyle, and the community.
Strutty's Feed and Pet Supply is a family-owned business proudly supporting the Spring Branch and Bernie areas. Their knowledgeable staff is always ready to help you find exactly what you need.
From livestock, horse, and show feeds to pet supplies, wild bird feed, deer feeders, blinds, and lawn and garden essentials, Strutty's has you covered.
With 2 convenient locations and top quality brands, they're your one-stop shop for everything from cattle and horses to dogs, chickens, and wildlife.
Visit Struttys.com to explore their products or stop by their Bernie or Spring Branch stores. So going back to your comment about how much you love futurities, who has been your favorite futurity winner of yours over all these years?
Oh, goodness. That's a
Gonna
hard
put you
one.
on the spot.
Oh, man. 20 gauge never lost when I showed him. And it's funny too, is, his offspring do so well in the fraternities too. But they just so much style. They're just thick muscled, great conformation, great color. Always plenty of size. That always helps too. So just so correct, I guess he's the one that hits my mind first. And there's been plenty of offspring out of him that have done really, really well too. I almost think maybe Hubbell's buckshot never lost in the show ring as well, and he actually looks a lot like his daddy. And I've had a lot of heifers that I've shown and done well with. So probably 20 gauge.
So I notice you just call him 20 gauge, not Hubbell's 20 gauge.
Well, it's just quicker.
What'd you say, Mark?
Everybody knows
Quicker?
it's Hubbell's 20 gauge. I don't.
This is one of my questions. I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you think everyone does, or do you think that, because it's your philosophy and your consistency, so your name is on all of these animals. Are you insulted at all when people shorten it? Do you feel like they know and it is just shorter to say it? I've always wanted to ask folks with those prefixes, how they feel about it when they're left off.
Oh, that is a good question, isn't it? At times you can be offended if people don't put it on there. Maybe in advertising, yes. If you're advertising something and it's not put on there, but when people are just talking, no, it's just easier to leave that off. I think I do it myself, So, I didn't put my name on the front of there really to be braggadocious, I guess. And the reason I did it is Watson. Wes Watson always had Watson, whatever, but it was just a number. He didn't name the animal as well, but that was where I decided that I wanted to put my name on there. In fact, when I did it, Tom Smith told me that was a stupid idea and it would hurt me on selling cattle. But I said, well, I don't care. I'm going to do it anyway. And so no regrets on it now. If that's a good enough answer for you.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it matters or not, because it's already behind you. You kind of have that tradition, but there are so many new breeders that we interview who it's their dream one day to be able to have their name at the beginning of an animal as well known as 20 gauge or Roman 7 or Rio's Glory, and so I don't think it's braggy at all. I think it's, just it shows all of the hard work that you've put in, and it's one of these things that all these new breeders coming in aspire to. So.
Good.
So let's kind of stay on this track of some of these very influential cattle that you have bred. Tell me what you think made 20 gauge stand out. Hubbell's 20 gauge stand out. I'll do better too.
What made him stand out himself in his pedigree made him great? Are you asking, or the physical characteristics?
In his pedigree, in his, his horn, his conformation, his breeding legacy, just kind of everything. What is going to make him go down as one of the greatest bulls, in our time?
I think, well, you can't be denied that his offspring excel in the futurity ring. And there's offspring out there out of him that are in the hundreds. They're topping sales. I think it's the whole package that he passes on, really. Beautiful color. It's just a complete package animal that, God blessed me with. I chose that particular mating, yes, but we all choose matings that never work too. And he's got a brother that's M2 rifleman, and he is a nice bull. He was never quite as perfect as 20 gauge. In fact, I sold him to Tom Matat, and I fully, was transparent with Tom about it. There wasn't a lot of difference. It was just 20 gauge was just a little bit better all around. and Tom was just getting started. And so he asked that he could put his name on M2 Rifleman, and I was fine with that. So, and in fact, he's still out there, and there's been some good offspring out of him, but he was never 20 gauge, and he's proven never to be as good as 20 gauge, quite honestly. Or maybe he didn't get as many opportunities, but I still just think 20 gauge had that special, thing about him, that he passed on. And it's in the
So
blood.
was it evident? Was it evident at a very young age? Did you,
Yes.
you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, by weaning, he was already, standing out. He just looked sweet. He was just perfect. Like I said, he never lost in any for charities. And granted, it wasn't as, I'm not so blind that I say, oh, he probably would have these days, but I don't know, maybe he would have, maybe he wouldn't have. It wasn't as competitive back then, but it was still competitive. So,
You mentioned that you planned that breeding, so you were probably anxiously awaiting him and his sibling. Tell me a little bit about what made you decide on that mating of his sire and dam. Tell me a little bit about his sire and dam.
well, so Real Glory, his mother, is out of the first calf crop that I got out of Rio Grande, JP Rio Grande. Everybody calls him Rio Grande. And so she was out of the very first calf crop, and she herself was just perfect, just absolute perfect animal. And Jimmy Jones, so you're always looking for the next cross, and so I talked to Jimmy Jones, and he's like, "Oh man, Mark, I got this bull. I really want you to check him out." And it was concealed weapon, and so of course that was a long time ago. I don't even know if he sent me pictures now, but anyway, I ended up going down there and looking at him, and he was beautiful bull, but his legs were a little bit too short in proportion to his body. And I was just like, man, Jimmy, his legs are just a little bit too short. And so I just didn't do anything. And then I think another year went around, and Jimmy's like, man, Mark, I just love this bull. I really think you ought to get in on him. And so I think I just finally said, you know what, let's do it. But I always looked at him as a tool, and I only bred him for 2 years. I wish I would have bred him longer, because he ended up really being a great producer. But so I just put him on cows that had plenty of leg under them, and Real Glory was a big cow with a lot of leg, and so that was obviously. And I was looking for the next cross, which Concealed Weapon actually ended up being a really great cross on the Rio daughters, but that took a few years to figure out, and I only bred him for 2, and then we got rid of him. But so that was, like I said, I was looking forward to that cross because I could see it really, really working, and it did work out.
So this next question I have might be a little touchy, and I'm trying to think of a good way to ask it. But you told a great story about how you were very transparent with the Matats about Rifleman, and how he was a full brother to Hubbell's 20 gauge. Do you think that there's any lessons to be learned, years later, when you can contrast those two bulls and everything that they've done for just across the industry when it comes to marketing ability of full siblings, half siblings, the values of animals placed on the bloodline where one is proven where maybe the others, through whether it be embryo work or that sort of stuff there's still a risk even with one proven animal? Does that make sense? Do you know what I'm asking?
No, say that again.
So just, I guess I was hoping you could speak a little bit to, like Hubbell's 20 gauge is maybe the exception to the rule, right? So with Rifleman being his full brother, he still didn't, live up to as much as what 20 gauge did, because even though they're full brothers, they still have different traits, and just kind of there's a lot of weight put on full sisters, half sisters, full brothers in the industry, where I think some folks get wrapped up in that versus looking at the animals themselves. So I just didn't know if you could speak to any advice about that, or if that's too touchy of a question.
It's not too touchy. That is tough. It never seems like full siblings ever are the same in Longhorns. And it seems, I'm sure you can find exception, but it seems like the firstborn is the best most times. Not always, but it seems that way more commonly. I couldn't tell you, with 20 gauge and rifleman, which one was born first, but it was a flush. So I don't really know if it has any bearings in those cases. It was just that 20 gauge he stood out just a little bit better. Obviously Matats knew it was the same genetics, and you hope that they both pass those genetics on. I mean, really, that's what we all hope when we buy a bull or we buy a cow, that they're going to pass on those genetics that we like in them, and whether they, physically carry those traits, or if it's in their mother or father or great grandparents, that something that we're looking for, we just hope that they pass it on consistently. And obviously Longhorns, that's a very hard thing to know and actually even get. It's getting better, I think, but it is definitely a slow road.
Hosting a livestock sale and wondering if you should add internet bidding?
With Hired Hand Live, you don't have to become a tech expert to bring your sale online. We handle the streaming, the bidding platform, and the support, so you can focus on the animals and buyers.
Online bidding lets past customers, out-of-state buyers, and folks who can't travel still participate in your sale without changing the way you run things in the ring.
If you're ready to expand your reach without adding more stress, visit hiredhandlive.com to learn how we can support your next sale.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about Hubbell's Real Glory, Hubbell's 20 gauges dam. She was another very well-known cow that you were responsible for breeding. What made her special back then, and what has her legacy become?
She was just a super nice heifer when she was just a calf. Nice flat horn, great conformation, great size, just beautiful. She was born red. And then she turned brindle, which was kind of funny when we first started getting calves out of Rio. Is getting all these reds, and oh no, sorry, that was Catch It. Catch It was throwing the reds, and then they started turning brindle, and then we're all loving them. Rio's turned a lot of them turned brindle on Rio. It was just a little bit slower. His mother had some brindle in her, and it ended up coming through in a lot of the offspring. Honestly, on the subject of Rio, I know you didn't ask me this, but it was funny, as you really could see in Rio daughters, his mother a lot of times in the good ones, and so once again, I carry a lot of weight in my bulls in their dam, because I think that's the second most influential trait that bull's going to pass on, besides the mother of the calf, is the mother of the bull. And so I like that influence to a large extent, really. I carry a lot of weight in that. But Real Glory, she was just a beautiful heifer and then grew into a beautiful cow. She was in mid 80s for a long, long time. She did get into the 90s. It was just, I love the horn set on her, the big body, great disposition. And so I hung on to her, and then obviously 20 gauge was, I don't believe that was her first calf. I can't even remember. I'm pretty sure it wasn't. But I've gone on to have, several daughters that I love too, and granddaughters. It passed on through. I bred her to Teos Star, and that cross beautiful body on it, but it was white, which I guess it came through Tejas Star, but it ended up being roan. And she never got a lot of horn, but her daughters were always just amazing. So it was just kind of one of them situations where the genetics were there and it just skipped a generation, but did pass on. So yeah, Real Glory produced Tejas Glory. Tejas Glory produced She's a 10. And then I've got several She's a 10 daughters still here. So it's just that consistency that I got out of her, along with the beautiful animal herself. They just made her a cornerstone cow here for me. Yeah. And that goes back to right in the very beginning. Tom Smith and Dick Lowe and I were coming back from Texas. I don't even remember what sale we were at, but we heard this breeder back then. He hadn't even been in very long. I mean, Richard Berquist was going through a divorce, and he was selling everything. And he had bought some really good Delta cows, like Delta Judy, Delta Ronita, Delta Gleam. He had some Watson 83 cows. He had 3S Favorite Beauty, just some really amazing cows. And then he had Watson 83 bull, who was a really great bull back then. And so we stopped in there and found out where he lived, because, back then it was a little harder, but we stopped in there and he had this group of heifers, and I ended up buying 11 heifers, all out of just amazing cows. And so that was really what put me on track, I would say, in the Longhorn industry. And then when I bought Real, that changed everything. But so Real Glory goes back to one of those cows. It was Delta Gleam that I got out of that original group. It was kind of cool, how when you can look back like that, then you can see kind of milestones or things that made a big difference in how things turned out.
Kind of a everything's related full circle moment for sure.
Yeah.
So we're definitely going to talk about JP Rio Grande. So I don't want to skip ahead quite yet, because I have one other question I wanted to ask you before we get into that section. I'm just curious, who are some other cattle with Hubbell in their name or the horned H on their hip that you feel were influential or are important to you that other folks may not know the history about or the importance of?
So these are ones that I bred or used?
Ones that you bred.
I bred. Okay. Well, ones that I always really liked. There was Hubbell's Tempt You. She was out of Catch You, or no, Hubbell's Catch You, who's out of Tempt You. That's how that went. Yeah. So Tempt You was a tempter daughter, that bred to, it was Catch It. Yeah. They made Hubbell's Catch You. She was always a really beautiful animal. And Hubbell, she's a 10. She's just been a super producer for me. I still do own her. There was Hubbell's Texas Tiger. Actually that cow died here, but she produced a lot of really nice daughters that went on to produce really well as well. Hubbell's Real Rivers. Rivers was an old cow that I bought. I mean, she wasn't old then, but a really pretty Grula cow. I think she was half Butler. I think Charlene Simpkin was a breeder on her, but she was a really pretty Grula cow with a really pretty horn. Kind of went out, up, and over. And I got a lot of daughters, females out of that line that have been really good. It's kind of the Real Rivers line. I got Cookies and Cream now, who's my favorite cow. I won a trailer with her at the Legends and good show rise, and I've got 3 real nice daughters out of her, and she's probably my favorite cow right now. So that's what comes to mind.
So those are the animals that you bred and raised. Tell me a little bit about animals that you bought that impacted your program.
Well, I guess I would say bulls mostly in that category, because obviously, there was, the 11 heifers that I bought back from the Berquist dispersal. Well, before the dispersal, actually.
those had a great impact. And then obviously JP Rio Grande was be the first one. And then Concealed Weapon. And then there was Cowboy Catch It Checks, full brother to Tough. He actually, it's been kind of cool because Concealed Weapon crossed really, really well on Rio daughters, and then Catch It crossed really, really well on Concealed Weapon daughters. And then 20 Gauge, who I bred, but he crossed really, really well on Catch It daughters. So, I'm part of the reason those bulls worked well is because I found they worked well on my cows, but they also went on to work well on a lot of other people's cows. So, it wasn't exclusive. And then female wise, that's hard because they don't have as great of an impact on your program as a bull does. And there's been a lot of years and a lot of cows. So that one's a hard one to really pinpoint, but I guess maybe back to those original 11. And there's been other good ones, that's for sure.
Well, let's get into one of the topics I know folks are dying to hear more about. So you were very instrumental in identifying JP Rio Grande early on. Tell me that story.
Well, I'm always looking for a bull. That is a never-ending quest. And I always want my bull to have a cow that I love, potentially the best cow that I can find that I think will obviously reproduce her traits. There are some bighorn cows out there that aren't able to reproduce. But so back then we didn't have the internet, really. We didn't have Hired Hand like we do to look at progeny pages. We didn't even have Arrowhead, if I can remember correctly, to refer to. And so you had to look at sale catalogs and magazines to really find the great cattle. And I came upon TXW Lucky Lady that Johnny and Pat Robinson owned, and she was one of the bigger horned cows back then. I don't think she was the biggest. And so I called up Johnny Robinson and asked him if he had any bulls out of her, and he said that he actually did. She had a bull calf at side, and it was out of Grand Slam, and I was not a big fan of Grand Slams. He had a bad back, kind of a sway back, and so that always worried me. And he was solid red, which kind of worried me too, because you don't want to calf crop a solid red calves per se. But so I asked him how the back was on the calf, and he said, "Oh, the back looked great." And I told him my concern about Grand Slam's bad back, and he said, "I tell you what, Mark, you have my guarantee. If this bull gets a bad back, I'll give you your money back." So I said, "Okay, well, let's wait and see what he looks like at weaning." And I'm very interested. So weaning came, and he looked great. So I went ahead and bought him, and I asked Dave Hoving, who him and I did a lot of stuff back then together, and great friend of mine. I said, "Hey, you want to partner with me on this little bull?" It was only $2,500. I said, "Well, split it. And if he doesn't work out, we're not out a lot. And if he does, then we're going to both win." And it made advertising more affordable. You split it and all around win deal. So Dave said, "Sure." So we bought him and brought him home. And then we measured him at a year old, because his horns were just, they're flat out, just like you like. And he was 32 and something inches tip to tip. I don't remember exactly what it was, maybe a quarter or 3/8 or something. And that was an unheard measurement. Never had there been a bull to measure, I don't even, over 30 inches possibly back then. And he was 32 and something. So we were just like blown away. So I took out, I think it was just an 1/8 of the page ad in the trails, and I put a picture of him, and then I would put his measurement and how many months it was. And so I just started doing that every month, just updating it. And little did I know, but most of the industry was just watching and waiting to see what his next measurement the next month would be. And I didn't even really do it for any other reason, as I was proud, and it was an amazing measurement, and that was basically the only way you could tell anybody. And so he was born in November, and we were getting ready to go down to the Horn Showcase to measure him, which we figured he was going to win. And lo and behold, I get a phone call from Bob Loomis, and he wants us to stop in on our way down to the Horn Showcase and see him before we go. And I was like, sweet. He's pretty much knew what that meant. And partnering with Bob would, that's like huge. So we stopped in, and sure enough, he wanted to get in on the partnership. So it was Dave and I each, and Bob had a third, and he went on to win the Horn Showcase, and I think he probably won a few after that as well, and just basically made history. So that was probably the funnest ride in Longhorns yet, really.
In your own words, what influence do you feel like JP Rio Grande had on the breed?
I think you could say he's had the greatest influence. Minus him would be total different looking Longhorns out there, I think. Him and Hunts Command Respect have just basically changed the landscape. I mean, it's crazy when you look at how far we've came, and I'm not sure we'd be where we are if it wasn't for that.
Once you and your partnership with Bob and everyone got rolling and he was winning horn showcases and, folks were interested, how did it come about? How did you decide as a group if you were going to sell semen or value and market his offspring? Talk to me about that process a little bit.
Well, I mean, semen sales was nothing new. So, and it was a great way to basically provable, because generally speaking, you think if people are going to spend the money on semen, they're going to put it in their better cows, not their lesser cows. So potentially has the opportunity to get great offspring out there beyond just what you produce. So that makes good sense, really. And man, the sons and the daughters were always very popular. I mean, in high demand because they were great. That's what made Rio great. You can have a great measurement. That doesn't mean you're going to reproduce and be consistent. That was the beauty of Rio, was that his consistency was second to none. I mean, there just had not been another bull out there that could put as consistent quality wise horn and the whole enchilada really of an offspring on. He legitimately built what he was. It wasn't hype. It wasn't just a measurement. He legitimately, did what he should.
Who do you think some of his most infamous offspring will go down in history as?
Well, I mean, I'd have to say that Tough Check's mother, who's Rio Catch It, probably go down as the greatest, most influential when you think of how much offspring is out there out of her sons. I think there was only one daughter that I'm aware of out of her. So I would have to say that it'd be BL Rio Catch It, probably, for sure. I mean, there's so many other ones out there with his name on it.
Is there anything else you want to share with our listeners specifically about JP Rio Grande before we switch to the next topic?
He would flatten out horn. That was one of his greatest attributes, is he would more commonly lay a higher horn cow's offspring down. He would flatten out the horn. He let the cow dictate the color more times than not. He threw a lot of brindle. It just was a slow brindle coming on. I mean, the disposition on him was always just outstanding. They were just really all around nice cattle. I hung on to him almost until the end, because I always believe if you got a bull that's producer, until you have a replacement that's as good or better, it's pretty dumb to let go of them.
And who was his replacement that you found?
Cowboy Catch It Checks.
And where did JP Rio Grande move on to?
Chris Clark bought him. I believe he bought all of him. And then, I know Chris was the one that bought him from me. Now, whether he had a partner or two, I know he did, but I don't remember who they were. Yeah, I'm pretty certain Chris was the one.
Well, let's talk a little bit about family and legacy when it comes to Hubbell Longhorn. So, your son Garrett joined the operation by purchasing his first cow in 2015. Is that right?
Yep, I think so. Sounds right.
So, what was that moment like for you as a father?
It wasn't like a earthquake moment. It was, I mean, the boys had gone with me to Longhorn stuff, and so they were a part of it already. And so when Garrett wanted to buy a cow, I was like, cool, that's awesome. And she was just kind of an average cow. She ended up being a really amazing producer, luckily for him. So it was, yeah. I mean, I've just always been involved with my kids, and so it was just cool. And it's funny is my other son has absolutely no interest in cattle, so even to this day does not have any likings of cattle. So John likes the crop side of farming, so that I still have that with him. But yeah, I mean, having Garrett involved in Longhorns with me is that undescribable. He's my favorite one to talk about cattle with, to just genetics and what direction we're going to go, what bulls. It's a dream come true, and he's going to be very successful at Longhorns. I already can see that. He's got an eye for him and a brain for it. So
Well, along with family comes friendships, especially in the Longhorn industry. So you've already mentioned a few names like Tom Smith, Dick Lowe, Dave Hoving. You all have shared many years and many miles, traveling from Michigan to Texas and all over. Tell me a little bit more just about how those friendships started.
there's one common denominator with pretty much all of my friends, and guess what that is?
Honestly, Mark, I'd be kind of scared to guess what that could be.
Oh, come on now. It's Longhorns.
That's a safe guess.
Oh, so yeah, I mean, I don't even really know how Tom and I met, or Dick, or how we actually came about to meet. But I mean, Tom and I first started traveling together just because we were the same age and just getting into it, and both had the same fire and common denominators, and just man, we were just best buddies right from the start. We had a ton of fun, that's for sure. And then Dick got in and he started traveling with us some. He never quite as much as Tom and I, but quite a bit. And in fact, I remember it was when Dick was first getting in. He was older than us. He's probably 20 years older than us, and we'd be driving down the road and talking pedigrees, and he'd be like, "Oh man, who's that out of?" And he's just trying to think. So Tom and I, "Oh my gosh, Dick," because him and I just knew pedigrees like crazy because that's all we ever thought about. And so we would quiz Dick just going down the road. Okay, who's this out of, Dick? Who's this out of? And he finally he learned it, but it was just kind of funny because he got into the game a little bit later. But yeah, we had a lot of good times, that's for sure. A lot of good laughs.
Is there any road trip stories you can share with us, or any sales stories, or anything that still make you laugh that are safe to share on the podcast?
Oh man, just even. Oh, Tom's half crazy, you know that.
No comment.
Oh,
No comment.
mixing a little alcohol and oh, I do know he wouldn't drink and drive, but we'd be flying down the highway, it was always 9 miles an hour over the speed limit because you can usually, you don't get pulled over doing 9 over, and we'd have cattle on a trailer, be driving, and somebody'd be going slow, and Tom would just be like just a few feet off their bumper and just offset a little bit. And I'm like, holy smokes, Tom. He goes, "Oh, I better get over, or I'm going to run him over." And sure enough, man, they would get over. But, oh, yeah, he's a hard driver, that's for sure. But, I mean, he cusses like a sailor and he's rough around the edges, but, Tom would never lie to you, and he would do anything he could to help you, and those are my kind of friends. They're real.
And both Tom and Dick have also both had a long legacy of breeding very well known animals. So
Absolutely.
those pedigree quizzes and all those road trips definitely, I think, helped you all.
Yeah. And, we all had just a little different taste in Longhorns.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was never an unhealthy, we were always competitive, but we are always just had a little bit different eye and taste and we were all completely honest with each other and didn't mean the other one seen it that way, but we could bounce off ideas and yeah, it's just really cool.
Did you all ever go in partnership on any animals together, or did your different tastes, kind of make that harder?
I can't think of any right off the top of my head, but the super hard part about partnering with anybody else in Michigan, I think we have probably on one or two cows or something, but that even then is kind of hard because then you got to split the offspring. But bull wise, it was always hard to partner with someone up here because they need them at the same time, and nobody wants to go every other year or things like that. Where Dave Hoving, he was close, and we had smaller herds back then than we do now. Plus, we kind of learned a lesson with Rio because it got to be real difficult, later on in the partnership, trying everybody to get bred what they wanted to him. So,
Are you all the friend group that is bidding against each other in the Calcuttas and giving secret signals to run the other up that way, or no?
oh, that's been known to happen. That's just having fun, that's just good fun there.
Nobody had to walk home because of it.
Nope, not yet.
Well, along with friends and family in the industry, you've also held some different leadership roles. I believe you have previously been elected to the board of directors for the TLBA, and just recently were again. Is that right?
Yeah, yes.
So why is it important for you to give back in that way?
It's just a big part of my life, and I feel like being involved is always wise and smarter than not being involved. And then you know what's happening and can be more proactive than reactive, I guess. It can be frustrating being on the board, but you always understand why things are done the way they're done when you're involved, even if you agree or disagree with it. At least you had input and you seeing the other side. So, um, there's been being on a board is a thankless job and it's frustrating at times, and it's a very slow process for improvement. You never guess it when you get on, but when you look back, you're like, holy smokes, we still haven't got that done yet. But it's always harder than it seems on the surface. So there's been some good stuff done during my time on the board, and I'm not going to say that I was key key reasons for that because that would not be true. But at least I was there and part of it and had opinion, and I just think it's better to give than take.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the Longhorn industry today, and then looking ahead for not only the industry but also Hubbell Longhorns. What trends stand out to you right now, both positive and those that are challenging?
Oh, I see. Well, I think now is easier to raise high quality Longhorns than it's ever been. There's just such a selection. I mean, if you look at all the great cows out there and the great bulls to choose from, and we don't all have the same eye and appreciate the same traits or want even the same traits, really. But it's just the wealth of knowledge out there on the internet, whether it's, obviously through hired hand websites when you can look at progeny. The beauty of hired hand to me is there's so many breeders there, so easily connected to them just by a click. And you can see the progeny where we used to, you had to remember who the great grandsire was or try to remember, you know, what that calf looked like. And now, we have all that right there. It's just amazing how much easier it is if you do your homework. If you desire it, it's there. I see a lot of people loving the futurities. I've loved them for a long, long time. it's just a really fun part of Longhorns, and you build friendships and relationships while you're out there doing it that are great. This that friendly competition and having a good time looking at a bunch of really nice animals. Yeah, they're young, but they're not all going to turn out to be as great as they look right then, or maybe some get better. But it's just a lot of fun. The Calcuttas are fun, and you get to see what's coming down the road. You know what I mean? Growing, and it's the great stuff, really. And it's crazy how competitive it is now.
What do you think newer breeders today sometimes overlook that experience teaches over time?
I think the new breeders don't do their homework. And maybe they don't really know exactly what it is that they really like, or because I'll never tell someone to follow the trend or to buy what somebody else told them to buy, because at the end of the day, you need to buy what you like, what really turns you on, because it's going to be at your house. You're going to look at it every day, hopefully, and you have to like what you have if you're going to stay in this breed. And there's more to that, to staying in the breed as well. Obviously, you need to build some friends, embrace relationships, and to get good advice from people you trust. I always recommend to listen to people that you like what they're doing. Just because they can talk a good talk, better look at their cattle, look what they're doing, and like what that is, because that's what they have is what they're going to tell you. So, but experience is everything. So it's just hard you can have a new person get in and you could tell them everything and what not to do and how to do this and how to do that. But more than likely, they're not going to listen to a lot of that because they don't have any experience behind it. And they're just going to kind of do what they want to do.
It's hard too when you're excited, right? You just want to
It,
go
it,
full steam
it
ahead and you have that
yeah,
excitement going for you. It's hard to step back and listen to expertise.
it is. It's kind of like relationships. In the beginning, it's this huge bonfire, and you can't see all the flaws and the negatives, and everything's great. And then, sooner or later, it comes down to a little campfire, and but man, enjoy those. Enjoy that big fire in the beginning, because it's a blast, and hopefully, you don't make too many mistakes,
Mhm.
um, and you do get connected to people. That's so key in my mind to staying in the Longhorns is being connected. I hear people complain that I go to these sales and nobody talks to me, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, and I think if we had some sort of welcome wagon, it would probably be great. But it's hard because, like with me, I'm at a sale and I'm always talking to somebody, and because they're friends of mine, and it's hard to just blow them off to go over and talk to someone that you don't even know because it's the right thing to do, per se. I mean, that's a hard thing to do when you got friends standing there talking to you. And so I understand that people get frustrated with that lack of relationships, but I think really that comes down to is, well, then you should go out and start building them. Go to ranches. People love to have you come see their cattle and just talk. You don't have to buy. Just get to know them, and then next time you see them at a sale or something, you can feel like you can talk to them because you already got a relationship.
Yeah.
So
And we've all been there. We've all been the person with no one to talk to, right? It's just, now after 30 years or whatever, you're not that person anymore. You've made those friends. So we
yeah,
all started there. We have to remember that.
right.
If you could go back to 1995 and tell yourself one thing related to the Longhorns, what would it be?
Oh man, that is a toughie. Um,
Maybe not to put those horns on the front of your car like Boss Hog, or no?
no, that was sweet. You know all the dates I got because of that? No, I'm just joking. Oh gosh, that's hard. I guess probably the biggest thing is just try to make it fun. Don't make it a job. And I just started out. I wasn't rich, still not rich. Um, I just do what I can do. And I see some people that everything has to be a profit for them or they're not happy, and they burn out fairly quickly in Longhorns. So keep it fun. Um, I've never lost the passion for Longhorns. And I don't know, maybe it's just my personality. I don't know. I was blessed that I could do what I love to do. I know that. And so there's probably not, I mean, there's always things you change. That anybody says that's not true, they're lying. But yeah, we don't need to always say them. No.
What excites you most about the future of Hubbell Longhorns?
I would say every year's calf crop, because I am okay. So I tell people this, and I think it sounds kind of funny, but I think we're created this way. I think God created us to in his own likeness, right? And so breeding Longhorns is kind of like playing God, because I choose how that cross is going to be. And then I get to watch it grow. And if it's good, I love it. If it isn't, then I don't. But, that's what, to me, a good part of my whole passion is I love to breed Longhorns. I love to see if I can make something great. And every year is another try. And obviously I love doing it with my son too. But that breeding side of it is I just love it.
Now that you've answered all of our high pressure questions, we're going to end with a fun game. We've been playing kind of a guessing game with all of our guests this year. So are you up for those easy types of questions now?
Yep.
All right. So we're going to call this one lore or legend. So I'm going to throw out a few statements that get repeated in the Longhorn world, and it's your job to tell us whether it's lore, meaning that there's some truth to it, or that it's legend, meaning that it's a myth more than reality, or I'll also accept the answer depends, because we know context matters, right?
True.
So here I have about 10 statements. You can spot a truly great Longhorn when they're young.
Legend.
Do you want to expand on that at all, or you just want to give the answer?
Um, you can't tell that. If you say you can, you're bullshitting, basically. You can hope, but you don't know. It takes time to prove anything out.
Great cows are harder to find than great bulls.
Lore. A great bull can produce many offspring, and you're going to know by that a lot better. A cow, yeah, you can flush her and that, but you still don't get the kind of numbers that you get from a bull.
The most influential Longhorns aren't always the highest selling ones.
Legend. A lot of your high selling cows are, I mean, there's a reason it brought that, I mean, some of them not, but I would say more are that way than not.
A famous pedigree matters more than what's standing in the pasture.
Lore. I think that genetics can skip a generation, but to get a junkie pedigree to really be great is very hard.
If a program is consistent, it's not an accident.
Lore. You don't have success with accidents. That's just life.
Winning futurities is more about breeding decisions than luck.
Absolutely true. Once again, you can win one or two with luck, but you know, if you're good in the fraternity ring, there's a reason, because you know what you're doing and you have a good eye. You have to be honest with yourself at home first and foremost. Is this animal correct? You know, is everything there? I mean, everything can be there and still not win, because something else is going to come in there that's just a little flashier or a little better horn set. I mean, a little big. It's so, and judges. I mean, I'll win one time and go the next time and not win, and you're scratching your head. And it's judges. Futurities it's one day, and it's just that day. Don't overthink it too much. Don't get too wrapped up. I see so many of these people get so wound up when they don't win, and why didn't I win? And why did that one win? And it's just that's basically three judges. I know there's five. Usually the top and the bottom are thrown out, but that's basically three people's opinion today. And sometimes they're idiots and sometimes they're geniuses. I've had it where I have a heifer and she should have won that class. And I think as a whole, they screwed up all the females. And then wham, I go win one or two with bulls. You know what? You can't call the judges an idiot now because you just won. So it's just one day. I tell people that, don't, if it's a good one, it's a good one. Don't get too stressed out.
That's great perspective. One great bull can change a program faster than years of careful breeding.
True. Because you got a whole calf crop, you can do careful breeding and that's going to take time, but you in that sentence, you said faster. So it will definitely change faster with a great bull.
You can build a respected Longhorn program without chasing trends.
Floor. I don't recommend people to even chase trends, really. You need to breed what you like and then do your very best at doing that. And hopefully you have a good eye for cattle and what you like. Other breeders, more than a couple, obviously, will like that too. And in the long run, it'll work if those things are true. But chasing fads is you're always going to be chasing and trying to catch up. I never recommend it.
The cattle that mean the most to their breeders aren't always the ones that win.
Legend. We get these people, and many people got heartstrings to certain animals that just an emotional thing,
The biggest breeding mistakes usually come from impatience.
Legend. I think the biggest breeding mistakes come from not doing your homework, not really being honest with yourself and getting emotionally excited about an animal for whether they got one characteristic that you really love or someone tells you it's great. Do your homework, look and see, is that animal really going to be what I'm wanting it? Is it going to produce what I want? So I think emotion can blur the good decision, and not so much impatience.
Well, that was really great perspective. And honestly, it's probably the kind of insight you only get from years of breeding and watching cattle mature and seeing how decisions actually play out over time. So thank you for answering all of those. And that actually wraps up all of the questions I had on my list. Before we go, though, is there anything that you wanted to be sure that our listeners know or advice you wanted to give that we haven't covered in today's episode?
Oh boy. No, I think I've been pretty thorough. I think I really recommend people to get out there and visit, because it's such a key to all this, just building relationships and looking at cattle and enjoying them.
And the best time to visit Hubbell Longhorns would probably be in January, February.
Absolutely. Yep. Just bring your snowsuit and
Take them out on a snowmobile through the pasture.
no, we'll go on the gator. We'll really freeze. No, probably anytime after it's starting in about May. I start calving in May, and man, when the calves start hitting, it's like Christmas. Just there's a new present.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on From the Pasture with Hired Hand and for sharing the story of Hubbell Longhorns, a program built on patience, partnerships, and generations of commitment to agriculture. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow along for conversations from the pasture. Until next time, take care of your cattle, your land, and the legacy you're building.